Morning, good afternoon, good evening. It was the Chinese businessmen who famously said that if you give a monkey a banana and $1 million, the monkey will go for the banana. He was trying to illustrate the problem with some people that instead of going for the opportunity to become a business owner, you always want to work for somebody else, looking for a job. But this can be extended to democracy, the right to have a meaningful say in the governance of one's country. We cannot deny that Zimbabwe is a failed state. And the number one reason for it is that we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Zimbabwe has been independent now for 44 years. Last week, we celebrated the country's 44 years of independence. And yet, last year, we held an election in which Zanu PF blatantly rigged the elections. In the past, organizations like SADC in the AU turned a blind eye to rigged elections in Zimbabwe. Last year, they did not do so. They condemned those elections. As flawed and illegal. They were only stating the obvious. We knew, we've known that Zanu was going to rig those elections as they rigged elections in the past. Without meaningful democratic reforms, Zanu PF was going to rig the elections. We knew that. And yet, we participated. The opposition participated in their numbers. And we, the ordinary people, participated. We were no different from the monkey. Depending on who you are, of course. If you are a judge, their banana was US $400,000. If you're a chief, you get a twin cab pickup truck, Isuzu. Members, church leaders, who the regime knew would bring them a lot of votes. They got farms, some of them farms and cars. And as you go down the ladder, when you got to the povo, ordinary person, all they ever got was a piece of chicken and chips. And they gave away their vote for that. The opposition, believe it or not, They were in the act. The opposition participated in their numbers. They knew the elections were flawed. They knew that participating will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. And yet, they went on to participate because they also knew that Zanu PF was giving away a few gravitrine seats. You have member of parliament, you get a $60,000 loan to buy a car. And as of November 2022, Mnangagwa increased the bait. MPs then got a $40,000 housing loan. And I'm sure that the current MPs will in turn get that as well. Plus all the housing, the generous salaries and generous allowances. Ever since the GNU, when Robert Mugabe bribed Mugen Tsvangirai and company with the ministerial cars, the generous salaries and allowances, MDC politicians, their appetite has been as sharp as a razor blade. Participating in flawed election has never been a problem because they also knew that if you are one of the few who get the gravitrine seat, you're comfortable. They in turn conned the ordinary Zimbabweans to participate in the flawed elections. For the ordinary Zimbabwean, other than the Zanu PF members, of course, they really got nothing from it. They were given an empty promise that Triple C would win big. That was, of course, a lie. Everybody could see Triple C was never going to win these elections. Zanu PF will never lose elections in which they've got carte blanche powers to rig. That should have been obvious. And in any case, the point is, the whole point of democratic rule, indeed, the primary purpose of the struggle to end white colonial rule is so that we blacks, as blacks, we could also have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. Are we now saying that winning rigged election is okay? Of course not. Even if Triple C had won last year's elections, flawed as they are, what guarantee did we have that future elections would be free, fair, and credible? We'll be going into those elections in the hope that we win rigged elections again? Anyone with any brain would realize that this is just a meaningless, endless cycle. The issue of let's implement democratic reforms to ensure that elections are free, fair, and credible should be clear to everybody by now. But clearly it is not. The 2 million or so people who voted for Triple C in last year's elections played their part in giving the vote rigging Zanu PF regime legitimacy. By participating, you've given Zanu PF legitimacy. That was explained countless times to the people, but they chose to ignore it. And the price for it, we gave Zanu PF legitimacy and find ourselves stuck. For 44 years now and counting, Zimbabwe has been stuck with this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship. The country's economy is in total ruins. And you would think that last year at least, after 43 years of rigged elections and the country up to its eyeballs in economic trouble, the people of Zimbabwe will be smart enough to realize that we cannot continue accepting a banana from Zanu PF. Let's sort out this mess. Let's sort out the mess of rigged elections once and once for all. They did not. They fell for it. Judges, the 400,000 US dollars housing loan was too tempting to say no to. And they played their part in the vote rigging that was to follow. And so down the ladder, everybody who took their share of the banana that we offered played their part. I think the people I blame the most for Zimbabwe's present political mess are the intellectuals. It is unbelievable that we have got people in Zimbabwe, some of them with university qualifications out there, professionals in their own right. And yet, the country has failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And they've said nothing about it. 44 years of rigged elections. And many intellectuals out there have said nothing about it. That is where we are. We want a democracy. We want to put an end to this chaos of rigged elections and bad governance. Then we have got to play our part. Sometimes silence means consent. Why have you remained silent? Some, of course, is because they are part and parcel of this Zanu PF dictatorship. Indeed, some of them are the strongest supporters of the regime. They played a key role in keeping the regime in power. It's interesting how both Robert Mugabe and now Mnangagwa have never had any problem recruiting intellectuals to work for them. Never. You can remember the case the present Minister of Finance when he joined the regime in 2018 as Minister of Finance. He was asked whether the elections were free, fair, and credible. And he was very careful to say they were. Of course, they were not. But he had been offered to be Minister of Finance. A cozy job, indeed. And he could say no to that. All of a sudden, the problem of rigged elections, he ignored it, pretended he didn't see it. I think that is one of the problems that a country like Zimbabwe has always had. You can never count on people to being honest and upright and fighting for what is right. If they were offered a position, they always took it and pretend they were blind, deaf, and mute. Saw nothing, heard nothing, and would say nothing. The truth of the matter is, Zimbabwe today is in a terrible economic situation. The country had the potential in 1980 when we gained our independence of becoming the South Korea of Africa. One Japanese scholar, Ken Yamamoto, remarked that Zimbabwe had the potential to become the South Korea of Africa. And I think he was right. And ironically, even now, Zimbabwe can still become the South Korea of Africa. But we've become instead the North Korea of Africa, ruled by tyrants who are selling the nation's resources right, center, and left at an unbelievable rate. The level of corruption in Zimbabwe and looting in Zimbabwe is shocking. And ironically, the gold, the diamonds, the lithium, which should be a blessing to the nation, have become our case. Because it is the wealth from all that looting of those minerals and other resources that is bankrolling Zanu PF. Sport rigging juggernaut. Yes, Zanu PF may not be offering bananas per se, but money. And people have taken that money at the expense of playing their part in making sure that Zimbabwe is a prosperous nation at peace with itself. They've taken the money at the expense of the good of the country. Ironically, even those judges who received their 400,000 US dollars housing allowance, wherever those houses are, I can tell you now, the minute they drive out their front gate, they go onto the public roads. full of potholes. Unless that house had the opportunity or had a borehole, they are struggling right now as we speak to have clean water in their 400,000 homes. Councils up and down Zimbabwe have been failing to supply clean running water to the nation. Yes, there are some private hospitals. So some of these filthy rich people have got somewhere to go. But even those private hospitals, they are also feeling the effects of Zimbabwe's economic meltdown. You still need to import drugs, petrol, and so forth. But the country's economic meltdown has reached all those other sectors. Shortages are a common thing in Zimbabwe, even to those who have got the money. But even if those individuals who took their cut of the bribes from Zanu PF, they cannot deny that while they themselves are doing well, they cannot guarantee. In fact, it is a fact that the rest of their relatives are not doing well. They can be assured that not all their children will live in a $400,000 house. And that's the way things are going. The day they leave their job as judge, the reality will dawn on them. Because unless they've got some way of guaranteeing that they will be paid in US dollar, they're paid in local currency, and they will know that Zimbabwe's economy is in a mess. Because they may find themselves, their pension being eroded by the same forces that have eroded the pension of millions of other Zimbabweans. Many of them got farms, and they may think they're doing very well. If there was to be a change, as usually there is in Zanu PF itself, the political infighting in the party is something that is unbelievable. As the national cake has been shrinking, the fighting among themselves has been intense. And if they should find themselves on the wrong side, they may lose the farm that they have. In Zimbabwe, nobody is secure. That is the bottom line. If Zimbabweans had not given up the good of the country by accepting bribes from the regime, Zimbabwe would be doing very well. Not for only the ruling elite, but for everybody. I think we have come to the point where we really need to change the system. It's not working. We cannot pretend that this is sustainable. It is not sustainable. Zimbabwe's political system is not sustainable. And we need to change it. It is most disconcerting when a human being starts behaving as irrationally as a monkey. To the monkey, of course, a banana is something that he can eat. He is familiar with it. The US dollar, what is money to a monkey? He doesn't understand that. But we are human beings. To say we do not know what it means to have good governance in this day and age beggars belief. Think we can sell the good of the country for the sake of the 400,000 bribe from the regime. It's stupid. How did we get to have these judges, such individuals as judges, chiefs, politicians, who are so unbelievably naive? Beggars belief. We have all paid the price for our short-sightedness. I think it's time we wake up to the reality and address this fundamental problem at the heart of why Zimbabwe is a failed state. This cannot carry on. 44 years after independence, we are still failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. That is shameful. Every Zimbabwean should hang their head in shame that this is happening. Zimbabwe has become one of the poorest countries in Africa. And yet, we've got so many resources. We've got such incredible potential. If we solve our problem of rigged elections and bad governance, Zimbabwe can still become the South Korea of Africa. Think about it. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, and good night.